A couple of weeks ago, I released a video going over my top 10 cozy games I'd ever played. There was a good variety of games, Valhalla being a visual novel, RuneScape an MMO, and Firewatch just being an experience. Since then, I've got a lot of emails with keys asking me to play their game. And I've gotten these before for whatever random games, but this time it was a little different. I noticed that the games I was getting keys for were similar to the ones I went over in the top 10 cozy games. As a YouTuber, this shows a lot of effort. Normally you can get emails that are like, hey streamer/YouTuber, they don't specify, we love your YouTube/TikTok/Twitter content, especially the way you make those videos. Would you like to try our game? There's no specifics, they don't know what the content's about. I've even gotten emails that say, dear sir/ma'am. Maybe it's just a less than graceful way of not assuming my gender, but it is in my channel about and my Twitter bio. But as I said, these emails were different, much more personal and clearly related to the games I've talked about loving before. So I decided to do something fun. I will play every single game sent to me in the month of November. There were unfortunately a couple of emails that didn't get back to me whenever I reached out, so the amount of games that I ended up with keys for was 7. Some of these were DLCs, some are early access, and some are full games that released recently. I want to be clear here, I am not being paid by any of these games. No, all they've done is send me a key for the game and perhaps a logo and some promotional material. I'll be spending about an hour checking out each game and giving my unfiltered opinions on it. And maybe you'll see something that really interests you. The first game I played was Lake, specifically the Season's Greetings DLC that just released. As a note, I did stream these games live so that everyone could see my reactions to everything. So I have heard of Lake before, specifically my fiance actually played the game and really enjoyed it. So I know a bit about it vicariously through her. You play as Meredith. You're temporarily taking over your dad's job as the mail carrier for a small town, just for a few weeks. When you deliver packages, you can interact with the people you're delivering to, and depending on the choices you make in dialogue, you can branch out the story in a bunch of different ways. You can choose who to befriend and even choose who to romance. For the DLC, you actually take control as her dad now that he's back. And the game takes place during the week of Christmas. Now, first of all, I love just playing as an old man. You don't get to do that in many games, and it makes the interactions feel different. I don't really know how to explain it. You talk to the old lady that owns the bookstore, and it's not an adult that you have to show respect to, it's your friend. It changes a lot of the dynamics between other characters and makes me choose different dialogue options as a result. I know I'm an old guy, I'm gonna choose the dad joke options. As you're driving around delivering everything, the radio will turn on sometimes and you can hear the talk show hosts talking about whatever's happening in the world, and music plays. Not like video game music, like actual music. Of course, there were songs that were composed for the game, but otherwise you're listening to like road trip songs, and they're all very well picked out. Really made driving feel like an enjoyable experience. Part of the fun while I was talking to other people is figuring out exactly where my relationship stands with them. The local farmer didn't really seem that fond of me, just like, oh, I'm there. The first interaction with Emily is funny because I didn't know she was my wife, and each line of dialogue you just kind of figured out more and more. Oh, that's my wife. Oh, that's really my wife. On the night of the first day, you get a call from your daughter, Meredith, who was the protagonist of the main game, saying that she'll come see you soon. She's coming over for Christmas. Exciting. Then after another day of deliveries, interacting with more townspeople, you then get another call from Meredith the next night, and she can't come because of her job. I'm riled up. I am choosing the most heinous dialogue lines about her boss that I can. And now during your next day delivering packages, you need to find people that will come maybe have Christmas with you because now you're gonna have an empty house. And of course it leads to a very awkward Christmas dinner because your family's not there. You can feel this story. You feel the awkwardness of the dinner. You feel the anger towards Meredith's boss. And you feel disgust at the kid who comes for an interview at the mail office just to be a little bit of a dick. The very first game, and already I can tell I'm going to be coming back to this one later. The next game I played was a bit of a 180. My Little Universe. It's a bit of a cooperative resource grinder similar to RuneScape in my original video. I went into this game not knowing what it would be like at all, and When I started playing it, a couple of chat members chimed in saying, "Oh, I played this on mobile. It wasn't good." I had just started playing, so I didn't have an opinion at this point, but then like 5 minutes later, they said, "Wait, this is different. This is better than the mobile version." So take that information how you will. So this is a fully released PC game based on a mobile game that was released about 2 years ago. You cut down trees, break rocks, defeat enemies, and use the materials you get to start building out more land on this planet you're on. And as you unlock more land, you find new biomes with new resources. Ad infinitum, there's a solid gameplay loop there. Every now and again, to break up the monotony, you'll find a shop, or an upgrade station, or a way to go fishing. Oh, there's a fishing minigame. It's officially a video game. And when you do pretty much anything, you'll also get experience to level up. When you do level up, you choose between one of 3 cards that give you different effects, like being immune to a certain status, inflicting a status on an opponent, or having faster special attacks with your tools to cut down resources quicker. It's a very simple game, and I didn't really have to pay a ton of attention to know what I was doing or where I was going to go next. However, that made for a great stream game. The whole time I was able to pay a lot of attention to chat, talking about whatever. I don't know if I could say the same if I was playing the game on my own. As for it being a former mobile game, you can kinda tell. Like, instead of a toolbar, you have to manually swap between each of your tools. And whenever you level up and get that card to choose from, they're called boosters, which is probably the most mobile coded word I've ever seen to describe like what I would probably call an enhancement or a skill. And then there's just a couple of graphical things like these goblins look like mobile goblin. I don't know, does that make sense? These are mobile goblins. Many people in the chat explain that this looks like a playable version of like those ads you would get every now and again that kind of look fun, but the game never end up being like the ad. And I can see that. I think if you're watching this, you can determine if this is the type of game for you. The next game on the docket was Cozy Keep. This is in beta, it's not even in early access yet, so everything you see is not indicative of the quality that the final game could have. You're kind of thrown straight into the game without much of a tutorial. You have these little quest-like commands in the top right corner, but they don't really give you a lot of direction. The premise of the game is you own a shop. You do have a debt though, and you need to pay a little bit of it every couple of days to keep the shop open. Among your first couple of tasks is unboard all the windows and the doors and clean up the inside of it. Once you've picked up a lot of trash, you can head out for the first time and give it to the trash goblin. No, I'm not kidding. This is the kind of direction that I wish most of the rest of the game had. Unfortunately, it kind of leaves you to your own devices from there on. I'm able to gather a couple of resources outside of the shop so that I can build a table to display my goods on, but constantly I find myself getting stopped from getting things I need because I don't know how to get it. For instance, okay, my shop is super dark. I need something to light it up. There's a chandelier in the build menu. I need rope. Okay, well, to get rope, I need thread. Oh, to get thread, I need wool. I open up the map and there's something resembling a sheep on the map, so I go out, I kill it, but I don't ever get any wool, I get meat. After a little finagling, I figure out I need to shear the sheep to get the wool. But to get shears, I need an iron ingot, which means I need a pickaxe. But to get a pickaxe, I actually need an iron ingot to make a pickaxe. A classic needing scissors to open a pack of scissors situation. Eventually, after playing a while and getting some chat direction, I find out where I can finally get an iron ingot without actually being able to make it myself. But it's very obtuse. Ignoring the direction though, this game has some good bones. I see where it's going. You have a ton of customizability with how you build your shop, setting up whatever lighting you want, putting the tables wherever you want, and I can see that later on you get options for like wallpaper and flooring. It's leaning into a side of the shop genre that I haven't really seen explored before in games that I've played like Moonlighter or Potionomics. And with a little more development, I think that this game could stand on its own. Next up is Tavern Talk, another game that's still in beta. This one was sent to me because it was very similar to Valhalla, the bartending visual novel I had in my 10 Cozy Games video. This one's a very similar concept, except it takes place in a fantasy setting. There is a demo out for the game, but I was sent an extended demo. As with any visual novel, there is a lot of dialogue, and a lot of the quality of the game depends on the art style, the writing, and the music, ambiance. And I'm happy to say that everything is good in those departments. This is a very high quality looking game. It reminds me of Hades a little bit with the art style. I think the only thing I could comment on is the dialogue is really low on the screen, making me look down a lot. Meanwhile, almost the entire top half of the screen is pretty much dead space. There's a couple of characters we got introduced to in the demo. Fable, who's a shy elf that lives in the woods that wants to go out adventuring. A mysterious stranger that we only saw briefly, they didn't really give us their name or anything. And then someone who was very evidently my and chat's favorite, Carolyn. Although the spelling of the name makes me think it might be like Scottish or something, so maybe it's not pronounced that way, but we can just call them Lynn. We don't know too much about them yet, but they are a rugged adventurer who is part wolf, it seems, which introduces a mechanic that's kind of unique to this game. You gather rumors as you talk to your customers, and if you put some of these rumors together, you can create a quest. And while this was just a demo, I feel like this is leading into a situation where you could give a quest to a certain customer, and that impacts where the story goes. Not confirmed, just speculation, and it feels like it's a very clear way to go with the mechanic. As for making the drinks, it's pretty basic. You'll get your order, and you can either make the order correctly or not. It's up to you. Each of your ingredients are like a stat in an RPG, so there was like charisma, dexterity, wisdom, things like that, and mixing them into certain combinations makes a certain drink. Near the end of my playtime, I got teased onto some new ingredients, so this isn't all you'll have access to. This game shows a lot of promise. A lot of people also mention that Coffee Talk is a bit of a similar game. I've heard of it, but I've never played it, so I don't really have much to say about it. Moving on to the final game of the first stream is a game that I'm somewhat familiar with, Moonstone Island. I'm actually familiar with it because Shawneedo played it a lot, but in a speedrunning setting, so I actually don't know much at all about the story of the game or the setting, only how to go fast. So it is a farming game, but that's not really the focus of the game. The focus is the card-based combat system, combined with a creature capture mechanic kind of similar to Pokemon. So on one side you do have establishing your farm and your house and everything, building your relationship with the townspeople. On the other side you have a complex combat system that, learning the ins and outs of, helps you explore farther into the world. Even though these systems seem so different, they perfectly intertwine and benefit each other. Learning new crafting recipes and getting more items from all of your crop money benefits the battles because you can buy more materials and food for your animals. I don't know what they're actually called. I've just called them Pokemon through the whole stream. When I played through the game, I managed to get through 3 days, and in that time I went on 2 dates with some of the people in town and completed a dungeon, at the end of which I got a Moonstone, which I can assume later in the game is one of the major MacGuffins. I don't want to go too in depth on everything I did in my short playthrough because that doesn't really explain the game as much as explaining the main mechanics does. I do want to explain how the game made me feel as I played through it. It was like nostalgia for a game I had never played. Everything was familiar in a way that didn't feel derivative of anything that came before. And the combining of 3 separate genres of game into one cohesive experience is enough to interest me. I'm surprised that the scope of the game didn't lower the quality of any of the individual pieces. Like Lake, this is definitely a game I'm going to come back to soon. Noun is a game to help you learn languages. So immediately I'm like unqualified to determine if it's good for that or not. I'm not a linguist or anything. I know one language and it's my native one. I can say that I do feel like video games as language learning tools is effective. Back when I was learning Spanish in high school, I would play Pokemon games in Spanish to help me learn some of the words. And of course, there's words that you'll never come across in real life. You won't be walking around Mexico City and someone says they cast a maleficio on you. But by like talking to NPCs and some of the names of moves are more common, like tackle, you get an idea of the language, as well as the structure. That's besides the point though. This is a game made for language learning. There's 7 languages available in the game: Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Spanish, French, German, and Italian. Personally, I chose Spanish as it's the only language that I have a little bit of a history with and wouldn't require me to learn a different alphabet. The gameplay loop is you go to all of these uncolored areas and you need to pick up items. Optionally, you can hear an AI voice speak the word to you, and then press V to turn on your microphone and you say the word yourself. I played around with saying the wrong word or saying the word in a bit of a different way, and while it's not too strict, if I very obviously said it wrong, it's going to say it's wrong. And while the looseness accounts for different accents, I did notice that if I put the emphasis on a different syllable than normal, it would still count it correct. Once you've learned a couple of words, you get tested on them by going to this screen. Then you're simply given the item and you need to remember the word for it. It only recommends that you learn 5 words per area, so as to prevent overlearning and you'll just forget the early words you remembered. And again, I'm not really a professional in the matter, so I assume that's okay. Once you get out of this first room, you're introduced to the hub world. Around the hub world, you can find all these different rooms with themed words, like a beach or a cafe. And you can also find all of these robot parts littered around the place. This is how you learn numbers. Each robot will have 3 parts. The first part has you repeat the number back to it. The second part is a multiple choice question in which you have to pick the correct word for the number. And for the third part, you're given the number and you need to say the word. Then you'll complete the robot and it'll roam around the overworld. This was probably my favorite part of the game. It's very addicting finding all these little robot parts. That's pretty much the main gameplay loop, but sometimes when you go into areas, you'll find characters. They'll speak to you exclusively in the language that you chose, and you have the option to translate it if you want. You can just chat with them or you can ask them questions, and this is an opportunity to learn conversational language. You can ask some questions and you will get the answer in return. The other thing added to break up the main gameplay loop is a minigame. In this minigame, you'll essentially be serving customers that come in, they'll say a word, and you need to match the item to the word. You'll only be given words to items you encountered before, so it's a really good way to reinforce your previous learning. In my eyes, the game is enjoyable enough, it's easy on the eyes, and it sets reasonable limits as to what you can learn in one day. I do know, however, that you shouldn't just learn a language through one source. This is a fantastic supplementary source, I'm sure. But just like you shouldn't only use Duolingo or only watch movies dubbed in your language of choice, you need to immerse yourself in other options. Moving on to the other game that I didn't stream live, Don't Die in the West. This one is also in early access. This is probably the game I knew the least about going into it. A lot of things surprised me, the character creator, the actual intro, and the game starts with us getting the deed to our dead uncle's land. I think I've heard this somewhere before. There's a bit of a twist though. We only get to keep the land if we get a working ranch going. And our time limit is whenever the railroad reaches the river. And we don't know when that'll happen. That's one of the game's many mysteries. We have to figure out whenabouts that will be. While going through the intro, one thing that jumped out at me is how clean the graphics look. It reminds me a lot of Link's Awakening, the remake on Switch. While we're getting taken to our dead uncle's estate, the driver doesn't want to take us all the way because there's bandits in the area, so we have to walk the rest of it ourselves. And this is where I start to figure out what kind of game it is. I can gather resources, I can craft tools and weapons, and I'm able to hunt for food, although this rabbit got away from me on the first go. Now you may see that the gameplay looks a little choppy. It didn't look choppy on my end. This actually had the opposite problem of Noun. I was able to adjust the aspect ratio and the pixel count of the game, but I couldn't make it in windowed mode, so it was full screen no matter what, meaning it was displaying in 4K on my computer. So it was strained while recording. These are options that I assume will get added in once we have a full release. Once I reach my uncle's estate, I find a squatter in one of the buildings. Also, there's notably bullet holes like all over the place. The squatter's just a kid, and apparently they were told by my uncle to wait for when I got here. For what reason, I don't really know. They also happen to look a lot like me, and I don't know if that's just coincidence by the way I made my character, or if it's like actually designed to have like your hair color and stuff. Now that we're at the farm, we start to unlock some of the progression systems of the game. When I use axes and pickaxes, I actually level the tool up. giving me skill points to put into a skill tree related to that tool. You can also build structures on the farm. So first I built a campfire so I could make some food for both me and Annabelle here. I also built a lumber station, which allowed me to refine some of my materials. And after long enough, I finally built the ledger desk. I didn't know it, but this is kind of the main quests of the game. Through this, I find out that I can sell a lot of the destroyed property on the farm and rebuild it. I also get tipped off to a donkey that ran off that apparently belonged to my uncle, and so I can follow some hoof prints in the dirt and eventually find her, giving me a mount. Eventually the tasks start telling me I need to go to town, and unfortunately town is blocked by a huge wall of rocks as well as some dynamite. So this is our first mystery we need to solve. Following the wire, it kind of goes off screen and sorta leads to a rogue camp. Talking to one of the nearby people, I find out that they stole his horse, so I have two reasons to go through here. The first time I tackled the rogue camp, it was a struggle. I was using my slingshot because that felt like the most weapon-like thing I had, but I was doing no damage, and they dealt a lot of damage to me. After recouping and getting some more food, I attack again, with the masterful strategy of running in circles, slapping them with an axe. And this works. I take the opportunity to raid the camp and I get a lot of unfamiliar materials like bullets and rope. Further following the wire path, it leads me to a cliffside. I find a little bed and a note saying that apparently this was also my uncle's doing. He was trying to blow up the wall so that he could get back to town, and I don't know if it's implied that this is how he died, but it's one of the last things he did. I take it into my own hands to blow up the wall myself. This game has good bones. It has a lovely art style and nothing felt bad. Usually when you play an early access game, there's certain systems where it's like, oh, well, I don't want to interact with that too much because it's kind of buggy and iffy. I know I only played a short intro section, but nothing felt missing. Everything worked the way I expected to, and I never got too lost for too long because there was a really good tutorial. Gosh, I think the worst thing I could point out is probably that there's no sound whenever text scrolls, so it's a bit quiet. And other than that, I'm excited to see how this game progresses. And that's it. I hope you didn't expect any kind of like tier list or ranking system. I simply wanted to play whatever games were sent to me to see how they were. They're all in different stages of development, so I think it'd be unfair to compare them with each other. One thing that this project showed me is how much I actually enjoy playing games. Lately, especially with the way my channel is, I tend to play like 2 or 3 games throughout like a whole year and never get around to the shorter experiences that I could knock out in a weekend or something. Games like Lake or Moonstone Island remind me that there's other experiences to be had. I hope you were able to find something that you liked out of the group, or maybe have been given something to look forward to in the next year or so. Thank you for watching, see you on the next one, and good night.